Well, I can't believe it. Here we are, 90 years old today, the oldest living surviving telephone operator of Lawrenceville, Georgia, my aunt.
Hallelujah. That I'm still here.
Yes, and you're doing great, and we are just so proud of you because you have lived such a long, happy life. I know sometimes you've had some rough spots, but for the most part, and just talking about this the other day, I realized how happy your life has been. Tell me more about your parents and how it was when you were growing up, despite the fact that it was right in the middle of the Great Depression. Apparently, y'all didn't feel that.
No, we didn't. My daddy was a farmer and a carpenter, and we lived on a farm, and he raised his own. Mom always had a big garden, and she would can things in the summer and put up for the winter months. And then Daddy had mules and horses, and he raised hogs, and he would kill hogs and put them in what they called a meat box. In a meat box, they'd put salt, and then they'd cut the hogs up like hams and things, and put them in the meat box, and then put a layer of salt, and that would preserve them for the winter. So that's what we had in the winter, was we had hog, ham, and all that good stuff, sausage and stuff. And then in the summer, we'd have the garden, and then Mama would can things to go with the winter things.
So they didn't really work outside the home, but you had what we'd call a home industry today with your producing your own food. But then you said your dad was a carpenter. Tell me more about that.
Oh, he was a wonderful carpenter. He was really in demand, and he didn't have much education. So I was his bookkeeper, and he would tell me how much lumber that he needed to order for a certain house or something like that. So he was a wonderful carpenter, and he never smoked and he never drank, but he died with lung cancer because the asbestos from the sheetrock building, made him have lung cancer.
Wow.
So he died at 65.
But your mama lived longer, didn't she?
She lived until she was 79.
And you had a brother?
Uh-huh. He was worked at a steel mill, and somehow his hand got caught, and it cut his hand off. But he still worked with that one hand, and he was a real bad diabetic, and he died when he was 45.
Wow. But you've outlived, the lives of each
I just don't have
family.
any family anymore.
Goodness.
That's one thing bad about getting old, your family's gone.
Well, you've got your children
And
and
my grandchildren.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I don't know what I'd do without them,
But you went to school. You said your dad didn't have much education, but you...
I graduated from Grayson High School.
So
But I rode a bus the whole time.
Wow.
The bus came by the house, and so I rode the bus.
You told me the other day about one of your earliest memories coming to Lawrenceville. What was Lawrenceville like then?
Well, Daddy didn't have a car, but we had a buggy. So on Saturday, Mama would make a grocery list, and we would come to town in the buggy. I remember that real well. And then the stores had what they called a back lot, and that's where you parked your mule and your buggy or whatever. And that's what I remember. My first ride was in a buggy.
Okay, you have been going to Pleasant Grove Church your entire life.
Mm-hmm. We lived
One
right up the
church.
road. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I was raised right up the road from Pleasant Grove.
Well, I know back in our day, we were lucky if the minister could come one Sunday a month. Was that how it was at yours? He had to go around to different churches?
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
So, and then he went home with the people from the church
Right,
for Sunday
for
lunch.
Sunday dinner.
Yeah.
And Mama always gave him the best parts of the chicken.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we did the same
Yeah.
thing. The preacher got the pulley bone, although Louise and I would wish we had that. Okay, now, entertainment. You mentioned about the first movie you ever saw.
Oh, I'll never forget. It was The Outlaw with Jane Russell.
Black and white, of course.
Oh, yeah.
And how old were you then? Do you remember?
Let's see. I started driving when I was 13. I think I was about 14. And I took a load of my friends to Buford, and I was driving.
At 13?
At 13. Of course, there wasn't no law hardly back then.
Yeah, hardly any cars on the road. Okay, how old were you when you bought your first car? You bought it?
15.
Wow. And how did you do that? You went to
I went to work at Genesco for a short period of time, and I always had telephone in my blood because I would use everything I could find for a telephone when I was little. I remember that. And then one day in the paper they had an ad wanting a telephone operator. So I run up there and applied for it, and they wanted me to go to work that same day. And I told them I couldn't, but I would the next day. So that was in 1945. And so I stayed with them until 1985.
30 years as a switchboard. 40 years. Okay, show me that headset. You've got what you had to wear back in those days? I can't believe that. You said you spoke into a horn, though, initially.
Yeah, initially, and then we got this.
Yeah.
And we thought we was in hog heaven when we got this nice thing.
Wow, that is great.
But one day on the old switchboard, before we changed, it wasn't grounded. The switchboard was not grounded. So they always told us when the lightning or the storm came up to get away from the board, to pull your headset off, get away from the board. So one day this flap kept coming down. Somebody at the cooler was trying to get us, and I said, they must have an emergency. I'm going to try to. And the girls that had been there before me, they said, no, don't do that, don't touch it. But I did, and it knocked me out. The lightning run in, knocked me out.
Oh, my word.
So when I woke up, they were pouring water on me.
Oh, my word. So lightning ran in on the switchboard.
On the switchboard, but they got it grounded after that. So.
Okay. So you had different jobs, though. I mean, you were a switchboard operator up until a point when they switched over. Do you remember when that was?
1959, when we went to dial. Dial phones was 1959. And so there were 7 of us that applied for the service rep job, and I was fortunate enough to get it. And I had to go to Athens for training for 6 weeks.
Wow. And
I was supposed to stay down there and come home on the weekend. Well, my husband wouldn't let me, but he did buy me a new car to go back and forth. Okay. So I had to go back and forth for 6 weeks to Athens every day.
And they didn't have 316 then, did they? They just had 29 highway. Wow. How long a trip? An hour and a half?
Well, in the morning I would face the sun going into Athens, and then coming back in the afternoon, I'd face it coming home and get behind all those big trucks and everything. So I lost about 10 pounds in those 6 weeks.
Goodness, that was hard. That was physical training as well as training for the switchboard. Okay, now your first job, how long were you there? You told me something about people dreading to go to work, but you never did.
I never did. I looked forward. I loved my job.
So every morning you got up regardless. Mm-hmm. Well, about that time though, let's see, you met Uncle John when you were how old?
16.
Okay. And he, at that point,
well, no, it was really 17.
Okay. And you had graduated from high school. Mm-hmm. You were already working for the phone company. Mm-hmm. So how long did you all date?
From March to November.
And then tell me what y'all did. You ran off?
Well, he had a night job, and I didn't trust him, and I had a day job, and he didn't trust me. So we decided, well, we'll get married, keep it a secret until we can save up enough money to, live together. So I had a nosy uncle that lived in Winder, and back then we got married in Winder at the courthouse. So you had to post your license. So my nosy uncle had to run, tell my mom and daddy he seen my license down there. So then we went to your mother and daddy's house to spend our first night. But it was fun. I dated him for 2 weeks before they found out we were married. So
y'all were technically dating 2 weeks when you were actually married, but you'd been dating for 6 or 7 months before that. That's good. Now, I had told him about the accident my daddy had, but tell him about when you got up to get some water in the kitchen.
Oh, her dad had a glass eye, and I didn't know it. I knew her daddy real well, but he didn't. You couldn't tell he had that glass eye. So I went in the kitchen. We'd already gone to bed, and I went in the kitchen to get me some water. And there on the cabinet was this little bowl and this big eye looking up at me, and it just scared me to death. I didn't know what in the world was in there. I thought it was something after me.
That's funny. You told me quite a few funny things that happened. What's a couple of other funny things that happened when you were at the switchboard?
Well, we were working, and the chief operator had just got through scolding us about something, and they were putting a new roof on the building at that time. And her desk was in back of the switchboard, and so we were all mad at her because she'd been fussing on us. And so about that time, we heard a crash, and we all turned around and looked, and the ceiling had fell in on her. She was sitting back there at her desk, and she had a piece of sheetrock on top of her head and a piece on her nose, and all that dust and stuff was all over her desk. And we laughed, and when we seen it, it didn't hurt her. It didn't hurt her, it just made her mad.
I bet it did. That's fun.
We all got in trouble about that, so.
Oh, that is so funny. Okay, so I wondered too, you said you worked at Genesco for just a short time? About what, 6 months? Or?
About 4 months. I lied about my age. I told them that I was 17, but I was just 15.
So, and do you remember what job you did at Genesco?
In the cutting department.
Oh. You
had patterns that you'd bring these big machines around and cut patterns for shoes.
And yeah, so I know a lot of Daddy's friends and the people at our church worked there. Did you also have friends that worked at Genesco?
Oh, yeah.
That was the big thing back then.
Oh.
That and Georgia Slacks.
That was two of the most businesses. You know, that's what got Lawrenceville started, was Genesco.
Yeah.
That's what made all these people buy homes and everything.
That was great. Okay, now you were married to John. You spent the first night in my mom and daddy's house, and then tell me about when you got your first house after y'all were found out.
Well, we rented some rooms from this lady, and it was back during World War II, and you couldn't get a stove, you couldn't buy stoves, you couldn't buy clocks, several things that we couldn't get. So we rented this room from this lady, and we didn't have a clock to tell what time it was. And so we finally did get a stove, and we would get up, not knowing what time it was, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I would cook. And the people that owned the house, you know, their bedroom was right there close, and she got on to us about cooking, so she finally bought us a clock, or gave us a clock, so we wouldn't do that.
That was funny.
So he just got out of the Navy, so we honeymooned for 3 months after that, because his mama had saved his money that he was sending back to her, and she gave that to him, and then he had been saving his money, so we lived on that until we used it up. And then he got a job as a prison guard, and then he was a Lawrenceville policeman for several years, you know, and then he went to the county policeman, and then he went back to Lawrenceville policeman for 30 years. He was policeman.
So you lived there on Benson Street, was it?
Benson Street.
And a little house. Was that where you lived when Sue was born?
Sue was born there.
Wow.
And then we moved over on Puff Street, and we've been there for about 65 years, or I have.
I tell you, you hold on to things. You held on to a job for 35 years. You held on to John for how many years? And then you held on to that house and their car. How long have you had your Jeep?
My Jeep is a 1991, and it's only got 68,000 miles on it.
never made any long trips, that's for sure.
Never made any long trips in
That's
it.
around here. Well, I was wondering too, tell me more about the years when John Paul was a policeman. With all that's going on today, worrying about whether or not your policeman husband is going to make it home, were you ever worried about John?
Oh yeah, I couldn't help but worry about him, but back in those days, there wasn't much crime. It was mostly just drunks and wrecks and things like that. But they did have some crimes, but I didn't worry about him like people has to now.
Yeah.
Of course, I worried about him, but you know, I expected him to be safe because there wasn't that much crime then.
Well, up until, tell me about the instance where those police officers, he was working for the county then instead of?
He was the county policeman.
Okay. Go ahead and tell me, how did that happen?
Well, Ralph Davis and Jerry Everett and Mr. Gravitt, they was all his real close friends that he worked with. And Ralph and Jerry was on duty that night, and John Paul was supposed to be on duty that night with them. And John got sick and he couldn't, so he called them, and they went and got Mr. Gravitt to work in John's place. So Mr. Gravitt got sick, so the policeman, Jerry and Ralph, was on their way to take Mr. Gravitt home at Duluth. He lived in Duluth. And they got a call about this car being stripped out there in the woods. And so they said, well, we'll take this call on the way to take Mr. Gravitt home. So that's when Alec Evans, who was the deputy sheriff, killed all three of them. And so John always felt like that if he had been there, he should have been there instead of Mr. Gravitt. So.
Yeah, I know that was a really rough time. I remember growing up hearing about that and seeing the articles in the paper. But it was Alec Evans, and were the others with him policemen too?
No, they were just crooks.
Just crooks.
Mean folks.
And they were all sentenced to prison and died in prison?
Two of them did, and then Alec Evans, the main one that killed him, they never did execute him. They were supposed to, but they kept putting it off. So he died about 2 years ago, I believe, in prison. He was still in prison, and he was almost 90 years old.
So the other two guys were electrocuted? I didn't remember that.
No, they were in prison and they died of natural causes.
Oh, okay. I didn't remember that. I know we've still got capital punishment, but if anybody deserved it, they did that for murdering three policemen.
But John
like
always
that.
felt so guilty, and I said, well, it was just the way God worked it out. It wasn't John's time to go. So.
Yeah. So Johnny was born when?
Johnny was born in 1955.
Okay.
There's 7 years difference in him and Sue.
Okay, so both of them still live here in the county, and your grandkids have lived here in the county. So, but you've been a traveler. Tell me about that at the church. What did you do to get into traveling?
Oh, I went everywhere. I've been to Canada, Niagara Falls, and Tennessee, and you name it, and I've been there just about it.
But how did you manage to do that?
When I retired. When I retired.
Yeah, but
I was with a travel club.
Okay.
And on this big chartered bus, they had the bathroom and everything, and the hostess would make all the arrangements, take care of the tips, the luggage. All you had to do was go have a good time. So I went to Canada in the Amish country and stayed 2 weeks.
Wow.
So John didn't mind for me to be gone for a week, but that time I stayed 2 weeks. When I got home, he said, no more. You can't stay that long no more. I think he missed me.
I bet he did, that home cooking, because like my mama, your mama, and you are great cooks. So for a while there, didn't your family come around just about every Sunday?
Every Sunday, Oh, we had a big spread every Sunday.
That seemed to be a trend back in those days, to come home to Mama's house on Sunday. Sometimes you bring a dish and sometimes you don't.
Yeah. I've got pictures of all this good food sitting on the dining room table. I wished I could still cook like that, but I had to quit.
It's hard to cook for just one person, I
It
know.
is. It is.
Well, I know you've had a lot of happy moments, but what do you think is your happiest moment, looking back on all the good times?
The happiest is when that little girl sitting right over there was born.
Sue is now 60.
68.
No. Lord have mercy, it's just hard to believe.
But she weighed 5 pounds when she was born. She's just about this big, had a head full of curls. Oh, I thought,
She was born in the hospital, though. Not
Oh,
like
yeah.
in my day when Dr. Ezzard delivered me and Dr. Williams delivered Louise. And who delivered Sue at the hospital?
Dr. Sims.
Okay.
And Dr. Williams delivered me at home, too.
Oh, okay. But you had a rougher time with Johnny.
Oh, yeah, I had a terrible time with Johnny because
The
my
doctor.
main doctor went on vacation, and this other doctor was supposed to take care of me. And when I needed him, he was drunk. So it was a bad situation.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Not like our hospital system now. Although,
Right.
Yeah. Those were the days, that's for sure. Well, looking back, I know it's been a difficult time in a way, back when y'all were first setting up housekeeping and then, when the kids came along and all. But I'd say that the fact that you have had a good, happy life with your family, gone to the church that you've gone to all these years, that's made all the life worthwhile.
It
all
did.
90 years of it.
I've really been blessed.
Okay,
Certainly have.